Welcome to JoBlo Horror Video's Best Foreign Horror, where we take a look at significant horror titles from all over the world. We started with one of the masters discussing his landmark Giallo film Deep Red, and after a stop checking in with another Italian horror master and his zombie gorefest that changed the subgenre completely, we are back with another take from Dario Argento with his 2001 title Sleepless. Sleepless, also known as, well, I can't pronounce that, but my editor will show you on the screen, is kind of a mix of two of our shows. This absolutely qualifies as an entry in our collection of best foreign horror, but would also be right at home as a best horror film you never saw. Usually, when we discuss Dario Argento or the Giallo genre in general, you are probably looking at the time frame of the early 70s to the late 80s, as both the director and the genre were in their peak during that stretch. Sleepless shows that neither were quite done putting out quality content. After completing his take on Phantom of the Opera with Julian Sands and his daughter Asia in 1998, Dario was stuck at a crossroads. He had built his reputation and catalog on his early career explosion of fantastic Giallo films, and then moved on to a string of critically and commercially loved supernatural fare like Phenomena and the first two films in his mother's trilogy, Suspiria and Inferno. After that, he worked with George Romero, a person who had a profound effect on his life and career, while paying homage to Edgar Allan Poe with their film Two Evil Eyes, and he remade one of his favorites with the previously mentioned Phantom. He was at a stage in his life that nostalgia was a dangerous fad for films, and fans were constantly asking for either a finish to his mother's saga or a new animal-themed slasher trilogy. While he wasn't ready for what would eventually be Mother of Tears, he thought he had enough ideas to get a classic Giallo throwback off the ground. This spark of creativity and drive would eventually turn into Sleepless. I'd like to thank you guys for watching Best Foreign Horror, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like this video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show. Sleepless begins with the final killing of a spree of murders dubbed the Dwarf Murders in Turin during the early 80s. The lead detective Moretti, played with great nuance by Max von Sydow, promises the son of the latest victim that he will bring the perpetrator of these terrible crimes to justice. Fast forward 17 years later and we are introduced to a prostitute with a peculiar client. She gets frustrated and leaves, but trips over his things on the way out. In addition to several knives, Angela discovers she accidentally took a folder of his things, and on the train she discovers documents that point to her John being a killer and ends up paying the price for it in a fun and extended stalking sequence on the train. Angela's friend that she called from the train doesn't fare much better and ends up being murdered in her car. The police, noticing similarities between these two killings and the dwarf murders from years ago, go to the home of the now retired lead detective to discuss what he thinks the connections mean. Unfortunately, Moretti's mind and memory have started to fail him, so he isn't able to be much help, right away at least. A third killing at a nightclub brings Moretti out of his home and he is able to notice things that the cops on scene just simply can't, leading Moretti to question whether the original crimes were ever solved in the first place. Cut to a now grown-up Giacomo, the child from the scene in the first part of the film, who is working at a Japanese restaurant when he receives a call from a childhood friend to come home after being told of the new spree of killings. Reluctantly, he agrees and is picked up by his friend at the train station. Giacomo and Moretti form an unlikely team. Neither work for the police, but both seek resolution and closure for this new killer's ties to the case that greatly affected both of their lives. They end up investigating the house of the dwarf believed to be the original killer and now long dead. Once inside, in a fun nod to the entire genre, they find a bunch of yellowed paperback crime novels, or Gialloception if you ask me. And on their way out, the drunk squatter who is occupying the house sings them the first few bars of a nursery rhyme that the killer is using to leave hints at the crime scenes. When pressed, the drunk denies any knowledge and flees back into the house. Another killing happens, and neither our duo nor the police are any closer to catching the culprit. Moretti and Giacomo attempt to find the remainder of the poem to try to get ahead of the murders and run into the mother of the supposed original killer. More and more evidence suggests that Vincenzo was not the original spree killer, and the real one is simply picking back up where he left off. Finding the end of the poem leads them to a performance of Swan Lake, where they worry their friend may be next on the list. While their friend is spared, another dancer is killed on scene, and when the police go to exhume Vincenzo's body, they find it has been recently taken. Vincenzo's mother confides in Moretti that she was the one who killed him to spare him further pain and torture, but when she goes back to look for more evidence of his innocence, she is killed by what appears to be a now living Vincenzo. Moretti has a breakthrough with the evidence and leaves a message for Giacomo explaining his theory about why the original killings happened in such a small net area versus the larger ones happening currently, but he too dies after suffering a heart attack when seeing Vincenzo alive and well. Feeling defeated, Giacomo decides to leave but runs into the drunk and offers a ride home. The drunk leaves some groceries in the car, and when Giacomo goes to deliver them, he sees the drunk with a mechanical dummy and puts everything together. Giacomo follows the drunk to discover his corpse and the father of his best friend the culprit. The two seem to be in cahoots the entire time until Giacomo discovers his friend Lorenzo was the true killer after realizing his inhaler was what he heard as a child. The reason the area was so small then and large now where the killings took place is because the killer went from child to adult. After a tense standoff, the police shoot Lorenzo through the window and the case is finally solved. Well, as with most horror movies, if the gore is done right, it becomes a highlight for the entire film. As with some of the better stalking scenes throughout his career, Argento crafts a great one right out of the gate here on the train. The victim tries to hide and tell the train personnel, but is ultimately taken down near a window no less. In addition to this, most of the death scenes contain brutal action and really good special effects. Now usually, we don't look at the performances in Argento's movies through the kindest of light, but he was able to nab one of the all-time greats here with Max von Sydow in the role of Moretti. His acting is believable and adds a much-needed depth to the character, while also elevating the performances of those he shares scenes with. We have seen good performances before with Jessica Harper in Suspiria and Carl Malden from Cat o' Nine Tails as standouts, but von Sydow here certainly puts the script and the film itself on a whole new level. Finally, the score brings back a lot of nostalgia. Yeah, that same nostalgia that Argento himself said was ruining horror, with Goblin making a return to their partnership with Argento. The score here feels like its own character, as it plays fast and frenetic during energetic scenes and knows when to slow everything down and be more of a background ambiance. Much like with von Sydow, the movie just wouldn't be the same without Goblin, and would almost certainly be lumped in with Argento's other output during this time. It's also fun to note here that while not exactly part of the score, the nursery rhyme that is central to the killings of the film is an original piece written by Argento's daughter, Asia. Almost all the cast, apart from Max von Sydow, are Italian who had varying links to their careers. Gabriele Lavia may seem familiar to fans of Italian horror, as not only did he make 2 previous appearances in Argento films, but he worked with some of the genre heavyweights throughout the 70s and 80s. Goblin is amazing, but they got a lengthy look during our first video. Co-writer of Sleepless, Franco Ferrini, however, deserves a special shout-out. Not only did he work with Argento on 9 other projects, but he also helped co-write Sergio Leone's American crime masterpiece, Once Upon a Time in America. Max von Sydow was a legendary Swedish actor who gained his footing acting in some of director Ingmar Bergman's most famous work. Nominated for 2 Oscars during his life, von Sydow would weave his way through many genres, including horror, sci-fi, action, drama, comedy, romance, and everything in between, with this group probably knowing him mostly for Father Merrin from The Exorcist. The film sits in a strange time in horror history and remains largely forgotten even today. That's unfortunate, as it's a great watch and shows that both Argento and the Giallo genre had something left in the tank. It got a very generic DVD release from Artisan that, while I remember seeing the cover for while working at Blockbuster, did nothing to stand out from the crowd. I'm excited I finally saw it, and I recommend that you give it a look too. Sleepless earns its rank within the best foreign horror.
Il nano assassino. Sa quello dei delitti del nano? Lei se lo ricorda?
No, veramente no.
Il nano assassino.
È stata con un assassino, un nano. Ha detto qualcosa a proposito di un nano. Il nano assassino.
Ancora il nano. Ma non era morto.
Vogliamo sapere del nano.
Del nano?
Lei stava per prenderlo, il nano.
E il nano scriveva libri gialli, vero?
Una persona piccola. E forse era un nanetto. Non sa, con tutto quello che scrivono sul nano.
Scarci tutti la memoria. Il nano ha ricominciato a uccidere.
Il nano è morto.
Allora, Giacomo, che si dice del famoso nano?
Il nano è morto.
Io credo che il nano non sia mai morto. Il nano se n'è stato per anni buono in letargo, fino a oggi.
Adesso basta con questo nano.
Il nano.
Sì, dentro c'è il nano. Il nano. Il pupazzo del nano.
Ho resuscitato il nano omicida.
Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on that bell to receive notifications for all the latest videos. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.